You join us on the starting grid for the Portuguese Grand Prix, the first ever Portuguese Grand Prix in this GP4 Manager Series. On the right, pole position, Mark Webber, the Australian. To his left, second on the grid, his teammate Jenson Button, 2 Toyotas on the front row, 5 lights are on, and the 5 lights go out, and Mark Webber gets away pretty well. And let's see what happens on this long run down to the first corner. Here I'm having a look at the nice wide shot of the field as we go into the first corner, fast right-hander. And it's Mark Webber who leads, with Jenson Button second and Timo Glock moving up into third place. Started the season's best fourth on the grid, and he's made use of a good start, good slipstream into the first corner to move up into third. And there's a bit of brake locking up in the background. Could have been Matthias Lauda, could have been Nico Hulkenberg behind him. Now as we go through the fourth corner, 180 degree left-hand hairpin, and there's a look at Matthias Lauda exiting the corner. Underneath the Adjit bridge, there's the paddock on the driver's right-hand side, and the kink. Look at this, we've got Sato versus Super Aguri into the Parabolica interior corner. You get Sato versus Alonso. Alonso is up to 5th, and Kimi Raikkonen down in 6th place. Montoya down to 7th from 5th on the grid. Well, Kimi started 6th on the grid, didn't qualify particularly well in the McLaren. Maybe the McLaren's not particularly working well on this Estoril circuit. Kobayashi was way down in 21st, easily his worst qualifying of the season. And going through the Parabolica now, Mark Webber, race leader, onto the long straight. It's exactly 1 kilometre long. And the overhead shot of Fernando Alonso as he crosses the line, 5th place, but make that 4th as he's up the inside of Takuma Sato going into the first corner. And he's got it. Fernando Alonso up into 4th place. And further back you can see Ricciardo up into 7th place, Heidfeld up to 9th, and Massa up to 11th. So we've got drivers on the move, and some drivers dropping down a little bit the order on that long 1 kilometre long straight. Worth mentioning Daniel Ricciardo qualifying 8th. That is by far his best qualifying of the season. And he's up to 7th, utilising potential upgrades. Since the last race at Donington, we have had the opportunity to upgrade the teams. And look at Vettel's head just jerking around on the straight there. Obviously a lot of buffeting behind Felipe Massa. That's who Massa overtook on the end of the first lap, as Vettel moves down to 12th place in the Red Bull. But yeah, the 11 teams on the grid had the opportunity to upgrade their cars from after Donington. We usually done it in a 3-race period. And then a little recap of the last race at Donington as well. The first time, well, hold that thought, because we've got Fernando Alonso about to challenge Timo Glock for 3rd place on the 3rd lap down the main straight. Is Alonso going to do it? Yes, he is. You couldn't quite see him make the overtake on Glock, but you can see in the timing screen he's up into 3rd. So we've got Fernando Alonso in the Super Aguri on the move as he understeers his way through turn 3. And can I do something about the 2 Toyotas in front of him? Well, there's Sebastian Vettel now down to 13th place. Adrian Sutil has made up a position. And I think Hulkenberg was a bit under pressure. He just lost a place to Lauda. And now he's got a Toro Rosso side by side with him. That must be Paul Di Resta, who is making progress. But yes, the last round at Donington. Now I feel I can just about do the recap. I think Hulkenberg was being challenged by the Renault going into the Parabolica interior. And that driver there, Jenson Button, he took his 2nd win in a row last time out at Donington. He had won at Silverstone and then took the victory at Donington, although it was a bit of a lucky one because at some point around lap 30 out of 76, Jenson made a move on Mark Webber, who had just taken the lead. At that point, let's have a look at Kimi Raikkonen making his way past Takuma Sato on the main straight into the first corner. And is that going to be 5th for Raikkonen? It is 5th for Raikkonen. So Kimi on the move now. His next target is Timo Glock as Mark Webber turns quite hard. And we've got Sebastian Vettel taking a bit of a wide line through the first corner. Usually that spells danger, but Vettel holds onto that one just about okay. But yes, Jenson collided with his teammate Mark Webber going through the old hairpin, and that prompted the retirement of Webber. It wasn't actually a hit with a barrier, it was the landing that caused Webber to lose his front wing, and one of his tyres, maybe 2 of his tyres, went off his car. And yeah, that put Webber out of the race. So that benefited Jenson Button, and it benefited Kimi Raikkonen as well, as he'd finished 2nd ahead of Takuma Sato. And Bit of a lock-up in front of Christian Albers. That's Hulkenberg. I think he might be struggling a little bit on his medium tyres. It's the hard tyres that the BMW Sauber team are running. So at the moment they're not producing a lot of grip. And there you go. That's another example of that. Hulkenberg, he's out. A little kiss on the wall after his mistake at the S's. And that is another retirement for the BMW Sauber team. He had Montoya crashing out at the last race at Donington, one of the many victims of the slippery old hairpin corner. At that point it started off very wet, then they changed on to intermediates at about 1/3 distance, and then around the second stops they changed onto the dry grooved tyres. So it was an interesting race. And amongst the other victims at the old hairpin, Sergio Perez was one, and Daniel Ricciardo was another. I think Sergio Perez was one as well, and there might have been a few others, but anyway, the upshot of all of that is that Jenson Button now holds a useful lead in the championship, as Sergio Perez gets his braking completely wrong at the right after the parabolic interior. Now they're approaching, I think it's called Gancho Corner, which is a fast right, and if you get that wrong, you're probably going straight into the tyre barriers. And Perez, there he is in 11th place behind Felipe Massa, and ahead of the Force India. That must be Adrian Sutil. Sutil had qualified ahead of Christian Albers for a change. And no, it is in fact Adrian Sutil. It is Adrian Sutil, yes, that is correct. As he challenges Sergio Perez for 11th place. Going through the first couple of corners, there is a look at Jules Bianchi. And off the track goes Jules Bianchi, and smashing into the wall goes Jules Bianchi. That is the second retirement of the race, and we're only on lap 6 out of 71. So we could be in for a fairly high attrition race, if that's anything to go by. That's at the first corner. That's at the exit of the first corner where Bianchi has crashed out. A corner where I'm expecting quite a lot of incident and offs. It is a very hot corner in the GP4 world. And there he is being rolled back into safety. So the results of that last European Grand Prix, it was Jenson Button who won from Raikkonen and Sato. Then it was 4th place Rubens Barrichello. That is a drive that he put in from way down the order, and utilising his, quite frankly, brilliant ability in the wet weather to go up to 4th. It was nearly a 3rd, but I think Sato got him at the end on fresher dry tyres they were. As you can see the field going through, and Montoya going off the track at the first couple of corners, doing a wall ride and now doing a spin. Now is he... Oh, he's been collected! There he goes! That was a Ferrari that collected him. Which one was it? Oh, it's carnage! It's carnage going into turn 3. There's a Red Bull involved, and a Ferrari definitely lost a wheel. Now is the Red Bull safe? Well, let's try and recap what happened there. Montoya is definitely out, and Sutil's out as well. No front end on that Force India at all. And Vettel out as well, so that Red Bull caught up in that as well. So 4 cars out of the race in one corner. And it started off with Montoya going a bit wide at the first corner, and then doing the wall of death on the guardrail, and eventually spinning, and then Perez it was who collected him. And then more mayhem ensuing, resulting in no front end for the Force India there, being craned away, and the Red Bull also being collected in that as well. So we've already got 6 retirements, and we're only on lap number 8. This is going to be a tricky race for all concerned. And there's a look at Nick Heidfeld, now in 8th place, challenging Takuma Sato for 7th. Sato's not particularly quick at this stage, had qualified 3rd, quite well behind the 2 Toyotas, but his race pace at the moment is not particularly good. Is he on a heavier fuel load, or is he running a softer compound of tyre, which is certainly going to wear heavily on a circuit which is very abrasive? Just looking, Robert Kubica, I think that is making his way up the order, up into 11th place, as Alonso gets all onto the curb, going through, which corner is that? Well, he's turning into a right-hander. I think that was approaching Gancho now, as Christian Albers versus Robert Kubica into the parabolica interior. And just in front is Paul Di Resta. Got both Toro Rossos in the top 10, and wouldn't that be a nice result for them after the season they've had? because they've not had a particularly good season, and you can see Alonso's camera playing a bit funnily. But he's at the moment in third place, just 2 seconds behind Jenson Button going into the first corner. Hits the apex no problem, a little bit of bouncing with his car on both couple of corners actually, so suspension's set up quite stiffly on the Super Aguri there. And just behind, Alba's having another look at Kubica going through the first corner. And Kubica goes way off the track. He's been pressured into that and he's smashed into the wall, and that is another retirement, the 7th already. So Kubica forced into that mistake by Christian Albers and is out of the race. And where did Kubica? I think he was in the points last time out at Donington. So Kubica, where is he? He had 6 points, so he finished in 7th place at Donington. So who else was there? There was Felipe Massa in 5th. Then there was 8 points for Lauda, 6th place. Then it was Kubica. Then 8th was Lewis Hamilton. Then 9th was Suttel. And the final point was Timo Glock, as Kubica gets wheeled into safety. I think just looking for the imaginary crane to hoist the Renault out of the way. What are the gaps between the top 10 at the moment? Well, the gap is 1.6 seconds between Webber and Button. Now we switch over to the battle for 4th. This is Timo Glock versus Kimi Raikkonen. So, Glock is some 4.5 seconds behind Fernando Alonso, and it seems as if he can't keep up with the Super Aguri at this stage of the race. There is the Super Aguri in a 3rd place, just 2.1 seconds behind Jenson Button. He's doing well, it's Fernando, and I'm hoping it's not because of a lighter fuel load. I'm hoping that the Super Aguri is genuinely competitive in this race, because the way the two Toyotas are going at the moment, particularly in qualifying, we had Mark Webber on pole position for this race, and in the previous race at Silverstone, well, no, it was actually Sato on pole position at Donington, then it was Button on pole at Silverstone, and pole position for Mark Webber at Austria. And Mark Webber setting a new fastest lap as Kubica finally goes into safety. First corner, Webber, no problems there. Keep an eye out further back and see if Jenson Button makes it through without any issues, but looks as if he has done, no problem there. And Raikkonen's taken Glock for 4th place. Kimi Raikkonen in the McLaren moving up to 4th. McLaren's running the medium tyres for this race, and I happen to know that McLaren have used some of their upgrade tokens for this particular segment of trio races. So, and I'll be able to tell you what exactly they have done. They have used some of the tokens on tyres, so looking to improve the grip levels for this and the subsequent races. Next one will be at Hungary. Certainly expecting a lot of soft tyres to be used for that one. And then what's the race after that? We are going to Mugello. Very, very different circuit to Hungary. Lots of fast corners and no real slow corners on that circuit. A whacking great long straight of 1.2 kilometres long. And plenty of opportunity for mistakes. Could say the same for Hungary. Do see quite a lot of incidents at the turn 11 corner. That's a fast right exiting the second sector. There's Nick Heidfeld in 8th place. He's being challenged by Felipe Massa down the main straight. Super Aguri's got some good straight line speed, and Massa's using that to good effect as he moves up into 8th place. So now both Super Aguri's, we've got 3rd and 8th for Alonso and Massa. There's an overhead shot of Jenson Button, and he is approaching, I think this is the parabolic interior corner along the left, which opens up at the exit. Short straight before a heavily cambered right-hander, and then Gancho corner. There is Albers going through the kink at turn 5, and now the parabolic interior corner. I think turn 4 is called the VIP corner. That's worth remembering. There is the Force India in 11th place, the only Force India remaining, as his teammate got caught up in a massive pile-up at the exit of the second corner. That was another new fastest lap for Mark Webber, and this is Raikkonen versus Glock once again. Glock hanging on, and he's looking to do something about Raikkonen on the main straight into the first corner, and Glock retakes that 4th place. Glock putting in an absolute sterling effort at the moment, even if he is not as quick as Alonso at this stage. But Alonso himself, he's catching up to Jenson Button. He's less than 2 seconds now behind the Toyota driver. So can Alonso do something about Jenson, I wonder? As we look at Mark Webber exiting, I think that's the parabolic interior corner. Now where's the second sector point? It's in the middle of that heavily cambered right-hander. And then he was about to approach Gancho corner, and then the S's, and then Parabolica. So there is Alonso going through Gancho. Let's call it that. I'm not 100% sure if that is its actual name, but it's something like that. But he's through the Parabolica now, and onto the main straight goes Fernando Alonso, 1.8 seconds behind Button. Now 1.7 as they cross the line. Alonso is on the move. And further back, Glock versus Raikkonen, take 3. This time around, it's Kimi Raikkonen looking to regain that 4th position off of the German. Going into the first corner, the Ferrari straight line speed is pretty good, but Kimi Raikkonen is the braver into the first corner and retakes that 4th place. I think we're on board with that. That was Mark Webber. We're on board with the rear-facing camera. But this is Jenson Button we are looking at now through the kink, and there behind is Fernando Alonso. Into the parabolic interior. On the real life Estoril, when F1 used to race here, that was the end of the first sector point. And the end of the second sector point was between the S's, the fast right kink, and then the left 90-degree corner. About there, where Webber has gone through. And then into the parabolica goes the Australian he's about to start lap 15 already. And Mark Webber needing a good result because he was absolutely shafted at Donington, and to a certain extent at Silverstone. It's a bit of a dry spell, and at the moment he's on 77 points, and that's nearly half of what Jenson Button has, because Jenson Button sits on 140 points and leads the championship by 14 points from Kimi Raikkonen, and Takuma Sato is just... In fact, it's Takuma Sato second in the championship, 14 points behind Button. And Kimi Raikkonen is that 2 seconds behind Takuma Sato. So it does seem as if it is going to be a 3-way championship battle between those 3 drivers. But maybe Webber could do something about it. He needs a bit of luck if he's going to remain in the championship hunt. And if Jenson Button wins the championship, he'll be a new champion, because since 2004, and we have had 4 seasons of this, there's been Kimi Raikkonen once, and then Takuma Sato 3 times in a row. Those have been your championship winners in the GP4 Manager Series. Now looking at the timing screens, Ricciardo has taken Glock for 5th place. So Timo Glock now dropping another position as Mark Webber sets a new fastest lap. He's now 3.1 seconds ahead of Jenson Button now into the first corner. Bit of camber to help with the top speed at the apex. Second corner, not quite as much camber. And here's Kimi Raikkonen. That's a bit wide through the first corner. Bit too wide, but he's survived that, as has Timo Glock, mirroring that mistake that Kimi just made. So Kimi trying to push to catch up to Fernando Alonso. He's pushed a bit too hard there. And he better be careful, because Daniel Ricciardo, he is on the move at the moment. And Kimi lost nearly 2 seconds in that little mistake at the first corner. On board with Fernando Alonso, still catching up, and look at this battle between Raikkonen and Ricciardo into the parabolica interior. No real chance of overtaking around the outside, and Ricciardo's lost a lot of time there. Now he's going to become under pressure from Timo Glock if he carries on driving like that. As that Jenson Button going through the parabolica, I believe so. And about to start his 17th lap as Mark Webber sets another new fastest lap, a 1 minute 10.703. And there is Timo Glock going through the parabolica, somehow managing to lock up even though no brakes are needed through there. So he's just pretty much just keeping the car. Maybe he felt a bit of oversteer and he had to stamp on the brakes briefly. Is that going to put him under pressure from Sato into the first corner? Not quite. but Sato looking a bit menacing behind the Ferrari, and Ferrari could do with some points because they've had a bit of a dismal season. They're sitting 9th in the championship, just 1 point ahead of BMW Sauber, and BMW Sauber themselves going through a bit of a rough patch, 3 races with no points, and with both cars out of the race, they're not going to increase their tally of 32. And if they're not careful, they may have Toro Rosso knocking on their back door. Although Toro Rosso are only on 10 points. So they'll need a big points haul if they're going to disturb the battle for 9th in the championship. Just on that battle, we've got Toyota leading the championship. They're on 215 points, and that's a very healthy lead they've got because it's some 59 points ahead of McLaren, BMW and Honda. Both those teams tied for 2nd place in the championship, although I think Honda should be the lead of those two because Sato... Well, actually, let me double check that because Kimi Raikkonen may well have had more 2nd places. 3 compared to Sato's 2. Yes, it is McLaren 2nd in the championship by virtue of having more 2nd places. And it's Takuma Sato getting past Timo Glock there. That is the battle for 6th place. And Sato has taken that off of the Ferrari driver. Somebody locking up into VIP corner. Was that Felipe Massa in 8th place, or was that Timo Glock in 7th? In any case, let's have a look at the approach to the Parabolica interior corner. Timo Glock locking up his brake there, so he's struggling a little bit as we near the end of the first stint. I wonder what sort of pit strategies are going to be run here. Probably 2 stops, maybe some going for 3 depending on how high tyre wear is at this circuit, but so far no sign of anybody making any pit stops. So it could be that everyone's attempting 2 stops as we go through the first corner. That's Jenson Button we are on board with, and he's maintaining the gap now between himself and Mark Webber, the race leader, 3.5 seconds pretty much, as Felipe Massa now challenges Timo Glock for 7th place down the main straight. And is he going to do that, or is that straight line speed of the Ferrari showing itself there? Because Glock maintaining 7th at the moment. Now there's Takuma Sato, he's 6th place now, looking to try and catch up to Daniel Ricciardo, but Ricciardo quicker by some 6/10 in that first sector. So I wonder if Sato may have made a little bit of a mistake at some point in the first few corners. And Ricciardo's keeping up with Kimi Raikkonen. This is a sterling drive from Ricciardo. Started 8th on the grid, so Toro Rosso's seemingly very quick in this race. And Kimi's not exactly catching up to Fernando Alonso. So, and the new fastest lap for Mark Webber, 1:10.649, I believe that is. And Jenson Button starting his 20th lap into the first corner. Hits the apex very well. Hits the outside curb, well, misses the outside curb on the first corner, but which is probably the safer option. And Felipe Massa, he's looking to try and take Timo Glock into the first corner. That's a much better run this time, and Massa takes it. Up to 7th place goes the Brazilian, overtaking the German in the Ferrari, Timo Glock. Starting to struggle a little bit with his tyres, perhaps. Now down to 8th place. And how far back is Heidfeld? He's 1.2 seconds off of Glock. Well, mate, that's 7/10 at the end of that first sector. So now Nick Heidfeld is going to try and challenge Timo Glock's 8th place as into the Parabolica interior. That was Raikkonen and Ricciardo. Now it's Sato, Massa, Glock and Heidfeld. And into the tricky little right-hander. If you carry too much speed, the camber can spin your car round. And still Webber sets those fastest laps as Felipe Massa goes through Gancho corner into the S's. Right, then 90 left. And he's going to try and close up to Takuma Sato for 6th place. 1.5 seconds is the gap between Sato and Ricciardo. Massa, sorry. Sato some 2.1 seconds behind Ricciardo, who himself is staying within a second of Kimi Raikkonen. That's a bit wide through the first corner for Glock. Now that's going to put him under pressure from Nick Heidfeld going through turn 3 and VIP. He's really struggling to turn into that corner there. And is that going to give Heidfeld an opportunity down the back straight with the kink halfway through? See the traction there. It looked okay for Glock as Webber goes through the S's. No such problems for the Australian, who's steadily extending his lead over Jenson Button. The gap is 4.1 seconds. That was as they cross the second sector point. Let's see what Webber does this time around. No new fastest lap this time for the Australian. And the gap between himself and Jenson Button, pretty much 4.2 seconds. And Jenson's still got Alonso some 1.4 seconds behind. Rounding the first couple of corners, Alonso really pushing to try and catch up to Button. Now there's the exit of the first sector point. Is it between turns 3 and 4? It probably is, as Heidfeld now challenges Timo Glock for 8th place into the first corner. And Heidfeld gets it. He's now up to 8th place. And then Rubens Barrichello in 12th place. That's a bit wide through the apex of the first corner, but recovers that and lives for another day. Running in 12th is Rubens, the only Renault remaining because Robert Kubica binned it at the first corner whilst under pressure from Christian Albers, who sits in 11th place in the Force India. And a brief recap of the race so far. So Hulkenberg was the first to crash out. That was at the S's. Then Bianchi crashed out at the first corner. Then a massive 4-car pile-up between Montoya, Perez, Vettel and Sutil. And then Kubica crashing out at the first corner. That makes your 7 retirements so far. And we have 15 runners remaining. And they consist of race leader Mark Webber, 4.1 seconds, the gap between himself and Jenson Button. Alonso 3rd, Raikkonen 4th, and seemingly making no impression on Alonso. He's now pretty much 13 seconds behind the Super Aguri driver. This pace that Super Aguri have found, and it wouldn't surprise me if they've used some upgrade tokens in between Donington and Estoril, because we're seeing Alonso there, he's in 3rd and keeping Jenson very honest. And Felipe Massa not doing too badly in 7th place either. And Ricciardo's in 5th at the moment. He's still less than a second behind Raikkonen. Then we've got Sato 6th. Massa 7th, then Heidfeld 8th, Glock 9th. Di Resta up in 10th place, Albers 11th. It was Rubens Barrichello in 12th. So that leaves the remaining 3 runners out of the 15 that are still running. Now who do they consist of? It's one of them consists of Matthias Lauda, then Kamui Kobayashi is another one. And who would the last one be? Let's try and work that one out in a hurry, because I'm struggling to work out who it could be. In any case, let's keep an eye on Jenson Button going through VIP corner now. 180-degree left-hand hairpin now to the back straight into a potential overtaking spot if the driver is compliant enough. And Glock once again doing his best to miss the apex. It's Lewis Hamilton. That's the other driver. That's not in the top 11, but should still be running somewhere. You can still see Glock struggling. Now he's under pressure from Paul Di Resta. Di Resta yet to score points in this season so far. He has come close on a couple of occasions. Could this be the race where he finally breaks his duck? Well, he's swarming about all over the back of the Ferrari of Glock, going into the interior Parabolica corner. There's McDonald's on the left, but fast food is not what we're after. We're after some fast action. Jenson Button's now the new race leader because, well, let's have a look at this. Glock versus Di Resta going through Gancho corner, so Di Resta getting some very good traction out of there. And that has put Di Resta up a position. Yes, Jenson Button now leading the race because Webber is in the pits, as is Alonso, as is Daniel Ricciardo. So now seeing the first of the 2 stops in action. That was Webber exiting the pits. And he's rejoined in 6th place behind Button, Raikkonen, Sato and Massa and Heidfeld. Crucially ahead of Timo Glock, because I think Glock is a bit of a cork in the bottle. Kobayashi into the pits from 14th position. And And, oh, is that an issue for Massa? Because that was a very slow run out of VIP corner. Through goes Heidfeld, and yes, Massa's in trouble because he's lost another position to Mark Webber. So keep an eye on, see if Massa makes it into the pits. But, yeah, bad luck there for the Super Gary driver. Had a good race last time out at Donington. Into the pits comes Jenson Button, race leader briefly. Now, is Kimi Räikkönen going to follow through into the... Is he going to follow him into the pits, or is he going to take the lead? There's Massa still struggling, because now Di Resta and... Whoa! Mark Webber getting a bit sideways at the S's, as he's now running in 5th place. Kimi Räikkönen's into the pits as well, as is Takuma Sato. As is Heidfeld, so we're going to see Mark Webber retake the lead of the race, surely. Well, there is Jenson Button about to exit the pits. Now, for Jenson, it's crucial he gets out ahead of Timo Glock, and he does so. And a bit closer now to Mark Webber. But Kimi Räikkönen, he's actually in the lead of the race at the moment, so Kimi Räikkönen staying out for a little bit longer. I did wonder if he was going to make a pit stop, but he hasn't done just yet. So that's why Kimi Räikkönen wasn't really catching up to Fernando Alonso. He had a little bit more fuel than the Spaniard. Now, how much more fuel compared to the rest of the field? Is he going to go a lot longer, or is he just going a couple of laps longer? Well, there is Alonso under pressure from Rubens Barrichello. Barrichello now in 6th place. I'm trying to work out the pit stop time loss. Well, there is Kimi Räikkönen going through the parabolica. Is he going to peel right into the pits, or is he going to stay out for another lap? He's going to peel right into the pits. So, not that much longer, but hopefully for his sake we can get a decent pit stop and try and rejoin, thicken the action. There's Massa, having rejoined after an unscheduled... Well, he'll have made it more scheduled, but way down the order now in 14th place. Glock into the pits, as is Barrichello. And is that Lauda in the pits as well? It is indeed, so that's going to... Let's see where Kimi Räikkönen rejoins first of all. He's exited the pits, so he's 4th place now. I think Sato has jumped to Daniel Ricciardo, and Daniel Ricciardo going way off the circuit, bang into the wall. That is a massive, massive impact. Well, he's thrown away a golden opportunity to score points for Toro Rosso there. And look, the entire rear axle has come off. You can see both wheels still attached to the rear wing. That was how heavy the shunt was. So I did say that Sato had jumped Ricciardo for 5th place. Well, now Ricciardo has gone and crashed it. So he becomes the 8th retirement of the race. And that's put Nick Heidfeld up into 6th place. Glock now 7th. And Di Resta in 8th place now. And then Christian Albers and Lewis Hamilton 9th and 10th. And there's Felipe Massa in 12th place behind Rubens Barrichello. So as for the remaining runners, well, you got Matthias Lauda, who's somewhere behind this lot, and Kamui Kobayashi as well. So that's your 14 runners now, as Mark Webber holds 1.5 second lead over Jenson Button. Now, is it growing or is it coming down? It's growing, but by the massive margin of 0.04 of a second, as that was Di Resta versus Glock. And is Di Resta going to take that? I think he was, as Heidfeld makes a mistake at the exit of the first corner. Now, is that going to put Heidfeld under pressure from Di Resta, who now at 7th is upholding Toro Rosso honour, because Daniel Ricciardo will have certainly blotted his copybook, and some team owners I think will look at that and ditch him for the next few races or so. Not saying that will happen, but I'm saying some team bosses may well do that. About to start another lap. Lap 29 now, Mark Webber. And he's starting to edge out the gap between himself and Jenson Button, because it's now up to 1.6 seconds. Through the first corner goes Webber with no problems, and I think Jenson Button was going to do the same thing as well, because both Toyotas are pretty handy drivers. And that's why the team are leading the championship by 59 points. And if it stays like... Oh my word! That is Rubens Barrichello getting it all wrong going into the S's. Very, very unusual place to go off there. And, well, now we're down to 13 runners. So definitely a race of high attrition, and it could well be that Whoever finishes gets points, and that would be quite unusual for a dry race, and even more so unusual for a circuit that's got lots of runoff in places. And Barrichello very nearly collected Felipe Massa in that aftermath as well. So that's both Renaults out of the race, so no chance of them scoring any points. Same with the BMW Sauber team, and same with a few other drivers from teams that still have one car running. So as Barrichello gets pushed away, somehow, even considering he's missing a front left wheel. Amazingly, he managed to rip off a wheel but still keep his front wing intact. That's actually quite impressive. Nearing the Armco barrier now, and nearing safety in terms of the invisible crane. There it was. Now we switch to Fernando Alonso, locking up going into the VIP corner. And he's now 4.6 seconds behind Jenson Button, so I think Alonso was one of the earlier drivers to pit, and I don't think that's worked out too well for himself. Staying out a lap longer has certainly helped Jenson Button, because he's got that gap down from about 4 seconds to 1.6 seconds. And Kimi Raikkonen's made some inroads into Fernando Alonso, because he is 10.5 seconds behind the Spaniard now. Well, make that 9.9 because Alonso made that lock up into the VIP corner. What's the gap between Webber and Button? It's now gone up to 1.8 seconds, and that was all done in the final sector, which consists of half a corner, half of that heavily cambered, tricky downhill right, Gadget, the S's and Parabolica. As Alonso goes through the first couple of corners, 5.1 seconds behind Jenson Button. That's a mechanical issue for Paul Di Resta. Oh no, Toro Rosso still not going to score any points in this race because, well, Ricciardo spaffed it into the barriers and something has gone wrong, and a big lockup for Jenson Button. Is that going through the Parabolica interior corner? So he's pushing hard. Here's Jenson. So we're now down to 12 runners. Goodness me, and we've not even hit half distance, and Di Resta's gearbox or transmission or drive shaft is gone. So that is unfortunate for the Toro Rosso drivers. Kobayashi comes into the pits. That's very early, and makes me think that he's had an issue somewhere that has necessitated an unscheduled stop. Now that lockup for Jenson Button's cost him a lot of time, because he's now 3 seconds behind Mark Webber, race leader, who's balked by Kobayashi exiting the pits. So Kobayashi should let him through into turn 3. No problems there. But Kobayashi going a lap down, but he's in 12th place. And his teammate Kimi Raikkonen playing with fire at the first couple of corners as he tries to catch up to Fernando Alonso, 3rd place Alonso. So McLaren's not looking that comfortable at the Estoril circuit, particularly in the hands of Kimi Raikkonen. And with Kobayashi now gone a lap down, but the way this race is going, he could still score points. No such problems going through the cambered right. Let's call it Foster's curve, because there's a lot of Foster's advertisements happening there. And for a corner which I don't know the name of, that will be quite useful. Fernando Alonso going through the Parabolica corner, the 180-degree right-hand corner that is very long and probably lasts for about 300 to 360 metres. There's Jenson Button now, he's going to try and put a lap on Kobayashi. That's not exactly going through the first couple of corners. Is he going to do it into 3? Well, Kobayashi's making it difficult. He's definitely blocking Jenson Button at this stage, as Webber locks up going into VIP, so even the two Toyotas are not infallible to the odd mistake. But with Button stuck behind Kobayashi, that's certainly not going to do his race any good. But now Kobayashi's going to let him through going into the Parabolica interior corner. Well, once again Kobayashi making it a little bit tricky for him. This is helping Fernando Alonso somewhat because he's now 3.9 seconds behind. Still 3.9 going through the second sector point. So it's quite close between the top three at the moment as we near half distance. Top three separated by less than 6 seconds, so that's quite encouraging, although I do think the Toyotas are the quicker cars at this stage. Let's see Webber as he goes through the first corner now. Nicely done. And he's got 1.8 seconds over Jenson Button. And Alonso now exactly 4 seconds behind Button. So, yeah, Toyotas are the quickest car on this circuit, although Alonso's outperforming his Super Aguri. Although Massa was very unlucky to suffer that mechanical issue that needed to bring his pit stop forward, but he did lose him a lot of time because he's now in 9th place and he should really be in 6th place, somewhere behind Takuma Sato and somewhere around Nick Heidfeld, who's stayed out of the chaos. There's another big lock-up for Jenson Button going through Foster's corner. Yeah, Heidfeld doing quite well in this race. He's up to 6th place. Glock, despite his struggles, is still there in 7th place. Though he has got Christian Albers lurking quite closely to himself because he's less than a second off of Timo Glock now. So that could be your next battle on the circuit. Felipe Massa, he's less than 2 seconds behind Albers, so keep an eye out for Massa. And we've got Lewis Hamilton now up to 10th place. Matthias Lauda 11th and Kobayashi 12th. That's your running order, because we've had quite a lot of crashes. And the one mechanical failure for Paul di Resta. The unlucky Paul di Resta. Mark Webber, who was about to go through the kink, and now Jenson Button's going through that very kink. Let's call that the Helix corner. As Jenson Button turns left at the Parabolica interior corner. I wonder who's going to make the next mistake and crash. We should maybe find out. As Alonso goes out of shot into Foster's corner. And Jenson Button going through Gancho. There's a nice little holiday resort on the outside of that corner. That's why there's very little runoff, because some people are enjoying a nice relaxing bathe in a swimming pool. And that's one reason why they couldn't just make more runoff in that corner, and why they ended up having to make that very, very tight chicane in 1994. It's been modified a little bit since, but yeah, it's a pretty horrendous corner, that chicane, and in some ways that's why we're running this version of Estoril. This is the pre-94 Estoril, or probably 93 version. 84 to 93, let's call it. As Matthias Lauda goes through Gancho corner into the S's, where Rubens Barrichello smashed it going into the S's, and where Hulkenberg carried way too much speed coming out of the S's and biffed it into the barrier. It was the lightest of touches, but it was enough to rip off his front right wheel. Just trying to see the gaps between some of the field. Is that a lock-up for Raikkonen? I think it was. A bit worrying seeing immediate image of smoke coming out of the McLaren, but it came from his tyres. I was about to mention the gap between Alonso and Raikkonen. It's now gone up to 12.3 seconds, so Kimi lost a second with that lock-up. It seems as if his tyres are probably not working very well. Through the first couple of corners goes Webber, and we've now gone past half distance. And if it stays like this, Toyota will be taking a massive leap towards their second Constructors' Championship in a row, because they are the reigning Constructors' Champions, although not the reigning Drivers' Champions, because that belongs to Takuma Sato. At the moment he is running in 5th place, and he is 4.8 seconds behind Raikkonen at the moment. Now Raikkonen's teammate could do the Finn quite a few favours if he holds up Fernando Alonso for a bit. Or at least unsettles the Spaniard with some dirty air from the back of the BMW-powered McLaren. Going through the Gancho corner, It says Honda on the back, but Superguri in this series are powered by Cosworth. On board with Christian Albers as he goes through the Helix kink and into the Parabolica interior. He is chasing Timo Glock for 7th place, and he is 9/10 behind the Ferrari driver. For this next sector point, he's gone up to 1.2 seconds, so I wonder if Albers may have made a small mistake at some point that has allowed Glock to extend the gap by just a few tenths of a second. I think Kimi Raikkonen's made another mistake somewhere because he's 12.9 seconds now behind Alonso. So Kimi definitely not happy on his medium tyres, and could be that the mediums that Michelin have brought for McLaren aren't working particularly well. Especially as Kobayashi is way down in 12th place. There he is behind Fernando Alonso in 3rd. Well, Kobayashi's was partly down to that unscheduled pit stop on lap 31, but mostly because the McLaren's not well suited to this Estoril circuit for whatever reason. Through the Parabolica, on board with Fernando Alonso, and he's about to start his 39th lap as Mark Webber goes through the first corner. He's quite relaxed out at the front, no such mistakes, no such running wide moments. Every time we look at Mark Webber, he's hitting the apexes pretty well. Let's see if Jenson Button does the same. Well, no lockup going into VIP corner, but a lockup there for Fernando Alonso as he tries to stay with Jenson Button. But at the moment, the Toyota's edging out the gap between themselves and the Superguri. Now, where would this put Fernando Alonso if he stays in 3rd place? Well, he currently sits on 36 points. 3rd place would give him 51. That could move him up ahead of Adrian Sutter and Lewis Hamilton if things stay as they are. Speaking of which, Hamilton's in the pits, making a pit stop. If that is his second scheduled stop, it's quite early because we're not quite on lap 40, so he'd have to do 32 laps on one set of tyres. And around Estoril, a circuit which has very, very abrasive tarmac, not ideal for the Red Bull driver. Yeah, Alonso could move up to 5th in the championship if it stays like this. So Hamilton's early pit stop has moved Matthias Lauda up into 10th place, and it's kept Kobayashi out of... It's kept him in last place. I think that was Kimi Raikkonen going through, but there is Jenson Button now, still 2.7 seconds behind teammate Mark Webber. Now, Webber was the first one out of the 2 Toyotas to pit. Now, if he does the same thing again, then that's going to put Jenson Button in good position to put in some good in-laps and try and jump Webber for the race lead. So this battle for the lead is definitely on. Just depends on how Toyota work their pit strategies. There is Webber going through the Parabolica now. You can see a whole host of conifer trees on the left, and then it turns into grandstands, and then a crane. No pit stop for Webber as he starts lap 41. 31 laps to go. 30 plus this one that Mark Webber is on. Once again hitting the apex of the first corner pretty well, now through the Mobile 1 curve, and now into the right-hand hairpin. The McDonald's hairpin, this will be. And Alonso's about to put a lap on Lewis Hamilton into the McDonald's corner now, and then into VIP. And Hamilton's some 20 odd seconds behind Matthias Lauda, and that'll put Lauda in good shape to finish in the points and help Honda's championship campaign. At this stage, they are... Well, Raikkonen 4th on 12 points, Sato on 10 points, and Lauda on 1 point. They'll lose a point to McLaren, but still 30 odd laps to go. So a lot can still happen. And then Mark Webber going through the Parabolica, and about to start lap 42. Gap between himself and Jenson Button, it is 2.5 seconds. Jenson is closing the gap. and we shall see what strategy Toyota run in the next few laps. They all came in on between laps 25 and 27 for their first stops, so should expect them in for the second stops about lap 48 to 50, maybe a little bit later depending on how much fuel they took on board. And the gap Raikkonen, it is coming down between himself and Fernando Alonso, so Kimi's now got his car under control. And he's starting to catch up to the Superguri driver, but he has got some 12 seconds to make up, so a bit of a tall ask if Kimi's going to make the podium. In some ways, Alonso deserves it a bit more, because he has driven a superb race for Superguri at this moment. And he did qualify 7th as well, so yeah, good drive for Fernando so far. It'll be good for Superguri to get some more points as they sit. Where do they sit? 5th in the championship, and they're tied with Force India, so yeah, there is a battle for 4th between Force India and Superguri at the moment. And if it stays like this, Superguri are going to take a massive leap ahead of Force India. And the gap still continuing to come down between Webber and Button. That looked like a lot of understeer through McDonald's corner for Button. And something fairly similar for Alonso. Maybe that is the line they usually take. The gap's remaining fairly constant. The battle for 7th, and Glock is still remaining ahead of Christian Albers. So if Albers has got the quicker car, he can't utilise it because Glock, we've seen, he's got a very fast car in a straight line. And Albers can't seem to do anything about it. And Massa's closing up to those two as well as Heidfeld locks up going into VIP. Now onto the back straight through the helix right. And then a bit more of back straight before the parabolic interior corner. That was Timo Glock in the background there. And he's got Albers and Massa lurking large, so a three-way battle for 7th place. And that's probably going to be decided in the pit stops. Now which corners Alonso going through? So is that the first couple of corners? Should expect him to turn right, understeer a bit at turn 3. McDonald's corner, now VIP corner, and indeed that is the case. Esteril's the first 4 corners is kind of like a mirrored reverse Catalunya, because Catalunya's final 4 corners, you got a left-hand hairpin, then a right-hand hairpin at Bank Sabadell, and then the final 2 corners of Europe Car and New Holland. Whereas Estoril, that's the first 4 corners, and it runs mirrored and in reverse. So 2 rights to start off the lap, and then a right-hand hairpin, then a left-hand hairpin. It's pretty much... Well, Estoril was the original circuit, so I always describe Catalunya as a bit of a bastardised Estoril. I do prefer Estoril, to be honest. Through VIP corner goes Matthias Lauda. He's in 10th place at the moment. And looking likely to stay there because he is extending the gap between himself and 11th place Lewis Hamilton. In fact, it's Kobayashi in 11th place, not Lewis Hamilton, so where on earth has Lewis gone? He must have lost a position to Kobayashi. As Alonso goes through helix right, you can see the paddock on the right hand side and some Portuguese mountains in front of him. Now Mark Webber going through Foster's corner and through Gancho now. And it's 2.4 seconds between himself and Jenson Button, so the gap remaining pretty static now. But it'll be interesting to see who makes the pit stop first. And I do wonder what tyres Toyota are running, because it seems that whatever tyres they run, they're always quick. And in whatever configuration they're at, they're always up there at the front. It'll be very hard to beat Toyota in the Constructors' Championship. I suspect McLaren and Hyundai, Honda will be relying on a bit of bad fortune for the Toyota team in the second half of the season. And this is the start of the second half as well, round 10. And after this we've got Hungary, we've got Mugello, the Tuscan Grand Prix. Then we've got a mid-season test number 2. And then the next series of races, which consist of Monza, Spa, Montreal, Long Beach for the Californian Grand Prix. Then we go to Road America for the United States Grand Prix. And then the last race of the season will be held at Interlagos. And it was held at Interlagos last season and the season before that as well. And it proves to be a very popular season closer due to the samba atmosphere. And on a brilliant circuit as well, with some legendary corner names as well. Yeah, Interlagos definitely deserves to be the season closer. 2 Toyotas on the same straight, and Alonso just about on the same straight as the 2 Toyotas. As Jenson Button goes through the first couple of corners, through Mobil 1, now through McDonald's, as Kimi Raikkonen now puts a lap on Lewis Hamilton. 4th place Raikkonen, and still closing the gap between himself and Fernando Alonso. It's 11.2 seconds, and now that Raikkonen has got his McLaren pretty much under a good rhythm, he is closing in on the Super Aguri driver. Through the Parabolica interior goes Button, and we are approaching the second pit stop window now. So who is going to make the first of their second stops? We'll be finding out in the next few laps or so. And the battle for 7th, Glock, Albers and Massa, that is still pretty close. Just 1.3 seconds covers those 3. And I wonder who is going to attempt the overtake. You can see the rate at which Kobayashi was pulling away a little bit from Hamilton. As Alonso starts another lap, there's Mark Webber. It's Jenson Button actually going off the circuit at the first corner, and he smashed it into the wall, but he's gotten away with that somehow. Well, the Toyotas are built very strongly, but Jenson Button, goodness me, he could have thrown away a golden opportunity to extend his championship lead over Raikkonen and Sato. Whoa, heart-in-mouth stuff, and now he's 7.3 seconds behind Mark Webber, race leader, so Mark Webber's lead looking a lot more comfortable, and Alonso now 1.4 seconds. That's Timo Glock pulling out of the race, so that's 7th place gone for the Ferrari, and both Ferraris out of the race as well. So bad race for BMW Sauber, bad race for Renault, bad race for Toro Rosso, and a bad race for Ferrari. So 4 teams have both cars out of the points now, and it's another transmission issue. Exactly the same place as Paul Di Resta as well, pretty much, so gearbox is failing coming out of the S's. So now we have got 11 runners left, and that's good news for the timing screen at the bottom, the timing chart, because that's all you need to worry about. And Lewis Hamilton now going through the Parabolica, taking a very wide line. As into the pits comes Kimi Raikkonen, so that's an early second stop. He was actually one of the last to make the first stop. This time around he's one of the first to make his second stop, as you can just see on the left hand side of the screen there, pulling into his pit box. So that's going to give an opportunity for Takuma Sato to try and jump the McLaren driver. And we've got another pitter, it's Christian Albers. So that's going to move Massa now up to 6th place behind Nick Heidfeld, now in 5th. They should expect Kimi Raikkonen to gain a couple of those positions. Maybe 3, depending on what Takuma Sato does. Sato's got about 5 or 6 seconds to make up on the McLaren. There's Jenson Button going through the Parabolica. Is he going to peel right into the pits? No, because Mark Webber is the first of the 2 Toyotas to pit. And Fernando Alonso in as well. So that's left Jenson Button with some clear track going through the first corner. Now, he was 7.3 seconds behind Mark Webber after his mistake. So he's got a bit of time to make up if he's going to close in on the Australian in his in-laps. Might be a bit of a tall order for Jenson. As out of the pits And still in second place goes Mark Webber. Sato's into the pits as well. So that's probably going to move Raikkonen back up to fourth place, because we've got Heifeld and Massa into pits as well. Keep an eye out for Kimi Raikkonen. There he goes up a couple of positions, and he's up to fourth already, past Sato. So no problems there for the McLaren. So he was 11.3 seconds behind Alonso before making his pit stop, and Alonso went one lap longer than the McLaren driver. So let's see what the gap is. It's 13.1 seconds, so Alonso's gained a couple of seconds over Raikkonen. Jenson Button now into the pits from the race lead, and we'll keep an eye out and see how far behind Webber he is and how far ahead of Alonso he will be. Massa is into the pits as well, I think. Or he's just exited the pits, actually. So, Mark Webber, who's about to cross the line and will take the lead. There he goes. And now Fernando Alonso exiting the Parabolica. And where's Jenson Button in this? Exiting the pits there. And Alonso still in third place as he goes through the first corner. But how far back off of the Toyota is Alonso? Let's find out as they cross the first sector point. There is Jenson and there is Alonso. So the gap between the two has gone up to 1.8 seconds. And Jenson did close in a little bit to Mark Webber, but not a lot. So Mark Webber looking quite good, as Matthias Lauda is the last of the runners to make their second pit stop. So that should put Lauda up into 9th place ahead of Kamui Kobayashi. But I think Kobayashi has got a stop to make, so that should put Lewis Hamilton back up to 10th place. Because remember, Kobayashi had that was very well wide there from somebody. I'm trying to work out who we're on board with. We had a shot of this from Mark Webber earlier in the race, so that could be the Australian making a bit of a mistake there. Crossing the line, it was Alonso we were on board with, actually. As Jenson Button goes through the first corner, that's wide again, and a bit wide there, and hanging on once again. Jenson Button really not comfortable in the first corner, and now Alonso is right behind him. Now is he close enough to make an overtake, or is Jenson going to use slightly fresher tyres to pull out a bit of a gap? We've got yellow flags out, so somebody's had an off somewhere. Is it Kobayashi? It's Kobayashi out of the race. And a wheel off, that is going to run onto the circuit. That is a danger. That is a danger. Who is going to hit it? If anybody's going to hit it. Oh, please not let it be Raikkonen. Please don't let it be Kimi Raikkonen. It might well have been hit Kimi Raikkonen. Let's have a quick look at the McLaren and make sure he's okay. But there's Takuma Sato going through shot. Let's keep an eye on the gap between Alonso and Raikkonen. 11.9 seconds at the moment. I think Kimi is okay. Let's wait and see as we cross another sector point. Well, Alonso just less than half a second behind Jenson Button. There's going to be a battle for second, hopefully. That'll give the viewers some nice bit of entertainment in the closing stages. And especially if Jenson Button is driving a bit ragged, then Alonso smells blood. And that will certainly... If Alonso can get ahead of Jenson Button, then that will help Raikkonen and Sato limit their damage. And I think Raikkonen has gotten away with it. They did clear that wheel just in time. Trying to see if there's any other battles out there. Well, I think Massa's jumped Christian Albers in the pit stop sequence because he's now up to 7th place. Albers down to 8th, and a lock-up for Alonso. That's going to cost him a bit of time to Jenson, and Jenson looking a bit more comfortable now in front as a result. But yeah, just 10 runners left now, so whatever happens, everyone's going to score points from the top 10. So Hamilton, although he's had a bit of a dreadful race, he's going to get some points. At least one, anyway. There's Jenson in second place, going through the first corner. No problems this time. And Alonso, similarly so. in third place, 1.4 seconds behind the Toyota driver. Through McDonald's, now through VIP, and Button is about to put a lap on Lewis Hamilton, the Red Bull in 10th place. So I'm just trying to look and see who has still got 2 cars running. Well, we got both Toyotas running, 1 and 2, both Superguris running, 3 and 7, both Hondas running, 5 and 9. And in the rest of the top 10 that consist of one car teams, that is. One McLaren running in 4th place, then one Williams running, Nick Heidfeld in 6th place, and then we've got one Force India, Christian Albers in 8th place, and one Red Bull in 10th place. Alonso going through the Parabolica now. And he's starting to drop back a little bit from Button, who himself is trying to put a lap on Lewis Hamilton down the main straight. And into the first corner, Lewis doesn't make that too tricky. He gives Jensen a bit of slipstream as well. There's a bit of British camaraderie. As through McDonald's goes the 3 of them. So that's Jensen Button, Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso. Now through VIP go the trio. Alonso 1.7 seconds behind Jensen Button. Through the back straight and through the right of the Parabolica interior. You can see a line of rubber on the braking zone. That's where drivers have been locking up going into that corner. Other places to lock up, you've got that corner there, the Foster's corner, and then some drivers have been locking up going into the VIP corner as well. So you may see a black line being developed by the burnt tyre rubber. And some of them, in some cases, will be developing little flat spots as well. And that'll make things very difficult to drive. Shakes your eyeballs to pieces. Now Alonso's going to put a lap on Lewis Hamilton, who once again doesn't make it too difficult. Hamilton getting a bit of a consolation prize with 10th place minimum. If things go particularly wrong for the top 9, then we may get a few more points out of it. But at this moment, it's starting to settle down a bit, and just a line on Kobayashi, it was another transmission issue that plagued the Japanese driver. Well, the McLarens have been very reliable this season. They've finished a lot of races, and it's been a fairly decent season for Kobayashi, although his qualifying's not been that much up to scratch. He does sit 9th in the championship, or rather he did before coming into this race, because we have got Heidfeld in 6th place at the moment, and that'll be more than enough to overhaul the Japanese driver. Matthias Lauda could even overhaul Kobayashi as well. Who else could overhaul him? I think that might be it actually. Maybe Christian Albers if he gets a few more points. Through the first corner goes Fernando Alonso. There's just 15 laps to go now. 57 out of 71 we're on. Well, 14 and 2/3 to go now. Through VIP goes Jensen Button, and he's 9.6 seconds behind Mark Webber at this stage, and the gap remaining pretty static between those two. So Mark Webber has won a race this season already, and that came at the Malaysian Grand Prix. He's had 2 second places and 2 sixth places, but that's been it for the Australian, who's been plagued by bad luck, particularly at the Australian Grand Prix, where on course to win, running into the errant tyre of Felipe Massa. It looked like a bit of a wide one for Heidfeld, and then a subsequent lock-up to rub salt into the wound. But yeah, Mark Webber, what else has he had? He could have won in Suzuka as well, but carelessly went off at the spoon curve in the closing stages and handed the win to Jensen Button. And what else did he have? He had a tangle with Jensen Button actually at Hockenheim, and then another one at Donington, and then I think bad luck struck again at Silverstone, and then was running quite well in Austria, but Sato was running even quicker, and as a result won that race. beat Webber on circuit. And then in Monaco as well, he lost to second place very early on due to a puncture, I think it was. That left Kimi Räikkönen to control that race very nicely to take McLaren's only win of the season so far. At the moment, Kimi sits in 4th place, unlikely to score another win. If something happens to the top 3, then he could get a podium finish, but a bit of a slightly off weekend for McLaren, actually, because Kimi was down in 6th on the grid. Joint worst of the season, along with Suzuka. And he was actually the best average qualifier coming into this race, but 6th place for him and 2 Toyotas on the front row have now put Jenson Button as the best qualifier of the season. Webber's now tied with Räikkönen and Sato, actually, an average of 3.1 in the 10 races that have happened. This is the 10th race, of course. But at least Kimi's 10-0 up on the Kamui Kobayashi in the qualifying battle. The only other 10-0 is at Honda, with Sato 10 up against Lauda. Some other qualifying battles that are going on. Well, BMW Sauber, that is 6-4 to Montoya. Then it is 8-2 to Timo Glock, 6-4 to Christian Albers, 6-4 to Lewis Hamilton. And it's 9-1 to Robert Kubica, 6-4 to Fernando Alonso, 7-3 to Daniel Ricciardo, 6-4 to Mark Webber, and 8-2 to Nick Heidfeld. So that's in their respective team battles against their teammates. Bit of understeer for Webber as he goes through McDonald's hairpin, now into VIP. How far back is Jenson Button now? He was 9.6 seconds as they started this lap. It might have been 9.5 because it's pretty much the same as before. And Alonso 2.4 seconds off of Jenson Button. And struggling to keep up, actually. I think Jenson's newer tyres proving the difference in this final stint. And Kimi Räikkönen, that early final pit stop, means that he is dropping back ever so steadily from Alonso, but at least he's maintaining the gap to Takuma Sato, 7.5 seconds between Räikkönen and Sato. Nick Heidfeld running in 6th place, 14.4 seconds behind Sato, then Felipe Massa, who we're on board with at the moment, going through VIP, now through Helix. 3.7 seconds behind Nick Heidfeld, and then Christian Albers, he's 2.9 seconds behind Felipe Massa, and then 9th Matthias Lauda, 21.2 seconds behind Albers, and Lewis Hamilton, 15.2 seconds behind Matthias Lauda. So field nicely spread as we enter lap 61. This is halfway around the lap, and after this there'll be just 10 laps to go. 10 more laps before Mark Webber could be taking his 2nd win of the season. If something disastrous happens to him, then Jenson Button would be... I see Matthias Lauda making a mistake through Foster's corner as he sits in 9th place, and very lonely there in 9th. He's got over 20 seconds between himself and 8th place Albers, and he's 15.4 seconds ahead of... Oh, he's up to... Felipe Massa's had an issue because he's gone off somewhere, and he's dropped down to 8th place behind Christian Albers. There was Massa coming into shot, I think. Or was that Jenson Button? Well, anyway, yeah, Massa's crossed the line now, so a mistake at the Parabolica corner, maybe the S's actually, has dropped Massa down behind Christian Albers. But still some useful points for Super Guri nonetheless, if it stays like this. Alonso 3rd with 15 points, Massa 8th with 4 points. A solid 19 points for Super Guri on the horizon. Anyway, as I was saying before, the gaps between each of the top 10 nicely spread out. There is the trail of rubber on the braking zone of the Parabolica interior corner. You can see more trails of rubber going into Foster's corner. And a bit of resurfacing work going on between Foster's and Gancho. I think there might have been some more resurfacing work on a different part of the circuit as well. As Alonso goes through the Parabolica, and he's fairly comfortable now in 3rd place. He is well ahead of Kimi Räikkönen and steadily dropping back from Jenson Button. It's pretty much 2.6 seconds the gap between Button and Alonso, as Webber, if you look at the overhead shot going through a VIP corner onto the back straight. And if Webber stays there, he will break his 100-point duck. He's 6 on 77 at the moment, and the win will put him on 102 points. And that could help boost his championship challenge, although with Jenson in 2nd, that would move Jenson up from 140 points to 158 points, and essentially extending the gap between himself and Sato and Räikkönen. I think if it stays like this, Sato and Räikkönen will be tied on points once again. Who has more second places? Kimi has 3, Sato has 2. So Kimi would retake 2nd off of Takuma Sato by virtue of having extra second places. I think the previous train of thought before Massa retired might have been on Jenson Button and Mark Webber. Button's won 5 races this season already, and Sato's won 1, Räikkönen's won 1, Webber's won 1, and Sutter has won 1 as well. So more or less the Jenson Button show, aside from a few wins from other drivers, one between those other 4 drivers. Webber could make it 2 for this season, as Alonso, there he goes through Parabolica Interior. Matthias Lauda once again locking up going into Foster's corner. Doesn't really need to either, because he's a long way ahead of Hamilton and a long way behind Felipe Massa, so Lauda doesn't need to be doing this. And he's about to go a lap down on the field, because you can see one of the Toyotas behind him, and that'll give Toyota a bit of a smirk, because there's that Japanese civil war, Toyota versus Honda. It's Jenson Button about to put a lap on Lauda, because Mark Webber is some way up the road. So Lauda is actually a lap down already. Next one to be lapped is Felipe Massa, 8th place. The Webber has got a little bit more time to make up. Can he see Massa going into Parabolica Interior? Not quite, so maybe Massa might be spared his blushes. Or was that Massa just going through Parabolica Interior? Well, there is Lauda about to go a lap down on Button. Now where will he let Jenson through? Is it going to be into this corner? Well, there's Sato wrenching the wheel quite violently, going through McDonald's and then VIP. Still wrenching the wheel going through VIP. Not particularly happy with the car in the final stint of the race. But there he is in 5th place, and could well be that his championship defence may well be slipping away, but still got 8 races to go after this one. And anything can happen in those 8 races. So don't count Sato out just yet. All it could take is 1 retirement for Button and 1 win for Sato. It could be a win for Räikkönen as well, and all of a sudden they'd be back in championship contention. Räikkönen now puts a lap on Lewis Hamilton, as both go into the first corner, and no real problems for either driver going through there. But more than halfway around the lap, ahead of Räikkönen is Mark Webber going through Foster's corner. After this he'll have just 5 more laps to go, and should cap off what has been a pretty successful race for Toyota. If they take another 1-2, then that will move their points haul from 215 points up to, ooh, that's going to be quite a lot, 258 points. and if McLaren and Honda take 12 points each, then that will move them up to 168 points. So 258 to take away 168, that will be a 90-point gap between Toyota and their nearest competition. That's quite frightening. Four and a half laps now left for Mark Webber. What's the gap between himself and Jenson Button now? 9.8 seconds. Can Webber make it 10 seconds before the end of the race? Well, there's Sato in 5th place. That's a bit wide through the first corner, but slows the car down sufficiently in order to not run wide and into the perils of the grass. And we have seen a few drivers go off there, and a few more drivers go off at the S's near the end of the lap. Quick recap, there is still just 10 runners left, 12 retirements in this high attrition race, filled with crashes and incidents. And they include both BMW Saubers. Well, let's start off with Hulkenberg first, because he was the first retirement. And now Alonso about to put a lap on Lauda, as 4 laps remaining for those two. Although Lauda is on lap 67 due to being a lap down. But yeah, Hulkenberg retired first after crashing out at the exit of the S's. Then we had somebody else retire. I think it was... who else was it? It was, and my brain's going, but anyway, there was that 4-car pile-up at the exit of the first corner between Montoya, Perez, Vettel and Suttil. Then you had Kubica crashing out at the first corner as well, and then his teammate Rubens Barrichello then smashed it at the entry to the S's, which was quite an unusual crash. Maybe he'd ran wide at Gancho, the corner that Alonso is approaching now. And Alonso going through the S's with no problems. And who else suffered issues? Well, Ricciardo, he threw away a good result by crashing out at the first corner. Biggest smash of the day, because he'd ripped off his entire rear axle, which it was pretty much just rear wheels and wing. And then you had Rubens Barrichello, well, I mentioned him already, and a few mechanical retirements. Jules Bianchi, he was another crash at the exit of the first corner. And then Paul Di Resta had transmission failure, as did Kobayashi and Timo Glock. So a few reliability issues mixed in with the chaos of the drivers that decided to bin it. And as a result, we've got just the 10 runners left, and those 10 will score points. That is the rule. If you're in the top 10, no matter how much of the race you completed, you will score points. Because Lauda crashed out at Adelaide before pretty much half distance, but he still managed to score points. And a new fastest lap for Mark Webber, who's just showing that there is still some pace left in the Toyota. And there he goes through the first corner. That was a mid 1 minute 10. But Jenson Button's beaten that. Look at that, a 1 minute 10.497. So Jenson Button having the last laugh there, as we're now on the penultimate lap. And it is still Mark Webber leading by 9.6 seconds from his own teammate. Alonso 3.3 seconds behind Button, who in some ways is a bit lucky to still be in the race, because he had a couple of offs. He had one, well, he went off in a big way at turn 1, hit the barrier quite a lot harder than Hulkenberg did, and that's Sato. He's running a wall of death round turn 1, so he's struggling with his tyres in the closing stages. But yeah, Jenson Button gave that barrier big clout and still managed to be in the race. Then he went off again at the exit of the first corner once again. Not quite in the same way as before. And that put him briefly under pressure from Fernando Alonso, but Jenson used his newer tyres to stay ahead and pull away from the Spaniard. But still a tremendously good drive from Alonso from 7th on the grid, and he's heading for 3rd. Kimi Raikkonen, McLaren's not particularly quick at Estoril, but he's managed to make some use out of it by staying there in 4th place, and Sato in 5th as well. So Jenson Button, he'll be 158 points, and Sato and Raikkonen on 136. So 22 points will be the gap between Button and his nearest 2 challengers. It's a decent race for Jenson, still extending the gap, but it is his teammate out in the race lead at the moment. And if Webber's going to challenge for the championship, then this will do him quite a bit of good, because he's had a few tricky races. He is in the final stages now, and well, we're looking at Alonso, but keep an eye out on the timing screen, because Mark Webber is about to cross the line to take his 2nd victory of the season. And the first GP4 Manager Series race at Estoril produces a win for Toyota, and a 2nd as well, and a new fastest lap for good measure for Jenson Button. Fernando Alonso, great drive from him to come home in 3rd place, and not far behind Jenson Button at all. There's Lauda a lap down and in 9th place, and there is Kimi Raikkonen coming home in 4th. Some form of damage limitation in his bid for the championship. And there's Lewis Hamilton coming home in 10th place. Sato in 5th. And now tied with Kimi Raikkonen on points, but Kimi ahead, having had more 2nd places. There's some much needed points for the Williams team, as Nick Heidfeld comes home in 6th place. And a bit further back we're going to see Christian Albers come home in 7th place for Force India. There he goes. And just behind is Felipe Massa. So both Supergirls in the points. And both Toyotas, of course, in the points. And both Hondas in the points. So there's a quick recap of the results. 8 drivers on the lead lap, and 2 a lap down, and then the rest either in the wall or suffering gearbox problems. So that was the Portuguese Grand Prix, the first of the GP4 Manager Series. Next we'll be heading over to Hungary for the Hungarian Grand Prix. We shall see you for then.